Last week, I said something, and a brother in the Lord at the congregation I go to gave me a what for on my comment. And it was in reference to 1 Corinthians 11. I said that I thought that this letter was talking predominantly about the Passover meal in the diaspora. Now, this is largely opposed by most scholarship. I know this. I get it. And of course, most Christian scholarship is going to say, no, they already thought the law was done away with. They were instituting a Eucharist. Okay, well, that's a whole different matter. But what I said was in 1 Corinthians 11, I thought that Paul was saying you shouldn't have unbelievers at your Passover meal. This brother in the Lord basically gave me a nice reaming out and said, hey, man, some of us have situations where that is really a difficult thing because we have a wife who is a believer and a husband who's an unbeliever. So what do we do? Tell the wife she shouldn't bring her husband? These kind of things. And then he also made a very interesting insight into 1 Corinthians 11, 23 through 34, which we will read in just a second. I want to speak for just a moment about the idea that we should split up a couple if one's an unbeliever. I think that, first of all, this ultimately comes down to each person and the person hosting the Passover Seder. There's a group in Tacoma, and they have it's something ridiculous, like 6,000 person Seder every single year. And obviously, you're going to have unbelievers that would come to that. Is there something wrong with that? I don't think so. And certainly, I think that Paul talks about in this same letter. He talks about how if there's a believing wife and an unbelieving husband, and she sanctifies the husband. These kind of things. Okay, so I think that obviously we should not be breaking up couples. But here's the insight. Do you have anything to say about this before
No.
we read this?
No.
Okay. I want to read this entire passage because I think it's worthwhile to do so. And it says, this is 1 Corinthians 11, 23 through 34. I'm reading out of the NASB. For I received from the Lord that which I also delivered to you, that the Lord, Yeshua, in the night in which he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, this is my body which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, he took the cup also after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. Now, I'm going to pause here for just a second. We've talked in the past couple of shows about 1 Corinthians and whether or not this is instituting something new or whether or not it's talking about a Passover meal. I believe that it is talking about a Passover meal. That's neither here nor there at this point. Let's pretend, for all those who disagree with me on this, let's just pretend for a few seconds instead it is talking about a Passover meal and go on. Therefore, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner shall be guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord. But a man must examine himself, and in so doing he is to eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For he who eats and drinks judgment to himself, if he does not judge the body rightly. For this reason, many young among you are weak and sick, and a number sleep. But if we judged ourselves rightly, we would not be judged. But when we are judged, we are disciplined by the Lord, so that we will not be condemned along with the world. So then, my brethren, when you come together to eat, wait for one another. If anyone is hungry, let him eat at home, so on and so forth. Okay. The observation that this brother in the Lord made to me was that Paul does not say, examine other people to see if they should be at your Passover meal, but examine yourself. In other words, this is an inward-looking. We need to be right with the Lord ourselves and not to judge what the other person is. Now, this is a really good point. And the reason why is because if you look in the beginning of 1 Corinthians and the sexual immorality that is going on among the Corinthians, I don't know if there's probably some liberal churches today, but most conservative churches and even Messianic congregations that are conservative in belief, that is, I think would probably not only kick somebody out or tell them they shouldn't come if they were engaged in the same sexual immorality as the Corinthians, but they'd probably excommunicate them. Yet Paul seems to say, I mean, it's very odd how he kind of deals with this, and tries to get them to see the light, so to say. So once again, now we get to this passage, and he says to examine yourself. I think this is a good point, and I think that I have to retract what I would say.
If someone's willing to come, like you have a married couple,
right?
One of the spouse is a believer and the other is not. They can, if they're willing to come, right? If they're there, then that represents the unity of the couple, right? And
don't miss any clips from Messiah Matters by clicking the subscribe button. Also, give this video a thumbs up and share it so other people can see it too.